Everyone, welcome to this session on Cloud Adoption Framework. My name is Herns Hermida. I'm the Azure Business Lead for Microsoft Philippines. And today we're going to be spending about close to an hour to discuss the basics and an overview of the Cloud Adoption Framework. So the topic today is Cloud Adoption Framework. Now, we want to, of course, set the tone by asking first ourselves the question, why is a Cloud Adoption Framework or Cloud Adoption Methodology important? The second thing is that we are going to discuss an overview of what is the composition of the Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. So there are steps and there is a process, and there are many tools and resources that is involved in the Cloud Adoption Framework, and we will be going through these tools and resources one by one. We'll also be talking about overcoming some common blockers when we adopt the cloud. That's the reason why we have the Cloud Adoption Framework, and how we use the Cloud Adoption Framework to overcome these blockers. And then finally, we'll go through tools, templates, and assessments. Watch out, get your pen and paper ready, or get your screen cap tool ready in your PC or your device, because there will be a number of URLs that will be displayed in this webinar, and you might want to capture some of those for your future reference. All right, let's kick it off by answering this very simple but very profound and very important question. Why is a Cloud Adoption Framework important? So some of you might be sitting there thinking, why do we actually need a framework? Isn't it easy to, with the tools nowadays, isn't it easier to lift and ship applications from on-premise to the cloud using the different Azure tools? Isn't it quite easy today as far as adoption and creating new applications in Azure? Aren't those easy? Why do we need to adopt a framework? Well, the quick answer there, before I go through the slides, is that it's not as easy as that. We very often fall into the pitfall of thinking that adopting the cloud simply means putting together a list of applications and then going through those list of applications and then migrating them or transforming them into clouds such as Azure one by one. So it's not as simple as that, because as you will later on realize, this is a very IT and very technical-centric approach, and because cloud transformation affects the entire organization, a framework such as what we're going to talk about today becomes important, so we get all the stakeholders on our side. So the digital transformation revolution is now undeniable. We are doing this webinar in the midst of a pandemic, and if you're listening to this as a recording in the future, after the COVID-19 pandemic, you would recall that during this time, digital transformation sort of accelerated much faster than ever before. But in any case, a majority of business leaders have said that digital transformation is the way to go. Majority of organizations have said that offering digital services becomes relevant, and the thing that accelerates this digital transformation is the move to the cloud, simply because all of the resources and all of the tools that it's necessary for you to digitally transform your business is available through the cloud, either as, for example, an Azure first-party native service, or a myriad of third-party or or independent software vendor services that were created using Azure tools. And the service or the savings that digital transformations is undeniable. A majority of organizations have said that it has contributed to increasing the profits, and 64%, for example, have said that it took them less than 4 years to complete the digital transformation, or they may go out of business. And again, that is further accelerated by the current COVID-19 pandemic. So just to give you some proof points on why Cloud Adoption Framework is important, let me just give you a couple of customer examples. So one organization, which is a global organization, a global advertising powerhouse called Dentsu Aegis Network, decided to go to the cloud by starting to move a lot of their applications from their on-premise data center to the cloud. Now, like any other organization, Dentsu Aegis Network, their cloud transformation or their cloud migration started with an IT project wherein they needed to study the cost savings, if you will, of moving from an on-premise setup across 4 different data centers to the cloud. But then they realized that it's not just a matter of lifting and shifting applications and transforming to the cloud. They needed to gain support from executives, from non-IT executives, from the business stakeholders. And because it's a major transformation, it's not just an IT transformation, but an organizational transformation. They need to get the buy-in from the non-IT folks within the organization and give them a semblance of stability and put in some change management capabilities to ensure that the organization continues to operate at its high level while the digital transformation is going on. So this is the reason why they have created or used the cloud adoption framework to govern the entire migration to the cloud. Belmont Green is also an organization that's part of it's an FSI organization. It's a banking and capital market organization. Interestingly, this organization was founded in the United Kingdom as a specialist mortgage provider. They want to provide an automated, streamlined and enhanced mortgage underwriting service to deliver market-leading mortgage journeys to customers. The thing that started their journey into the cloud was that their existing private cloud solution, or a cloud solution that they run in their data center, actually did not offer the regulatory security and functional requirements to support their strategic objective as a lending company in the highly regulated FSI environment in the UK. So they used the adoption framework, they used the cloud adoption framework for Azure to build a platform for the future. So they were sensible enough to think about building for the future, not just simply lifting and shifting applications from cloud to the from on-premise to the cloud. It's really about thinking about the entire transformation journey as a framework, again, to involve not just IT stakeholders, but non-IT stakeholders as well, and to get a buy-in and support from the entire organization. Now, modernization drives measurable ROI. This is the reason why a majority of organizations are now going through and even fast-tracking their modernization efforts. There are benefits to modernization. As you can see here from the left side of the slide, you can avoid significant on-premise infrastructure costs anywhere from data center space to hardware to software to power. You can also avoid full-time employee on-premises costs because it takes a lot of people to run a data center. Especially if you're a medium to larger size organization, you have to pay a team of people for the upkeep. Whereas, for example, for a major cloud services provider such as Microsoft, we employ these people and we spread the cost across thousands of customers. You can also receive possibly income on the upside from new and larger online, for example, B2C sales by simply transforming the way using digital technology powered by the cloud to service your customers. You can offer better products and services, deliver products and services faster, and in turn it will return your revenues. And we have seen countless of examples of that. So shifting from an on-premise operations to the cloud favors your bottom line, and the research and the results is undeniable. Even organizations here in the country, for example, who have said that they will never go to the cloud, which includes the government and the banking sector, have just realized that the benefits far outweigh their fear and concerns about running things on the cloud. Now, but we understand that change is difficult, especially, for example, for organizations such as those that are belonging into highly regulated environments, where you have to please or you have to be compliant with the number of rules that governs your industry and your organization. The change impacts everyone. We have, unfortunately, a lot of customers and a lot of us think that by transformation to the cloud only involves a technology change. It actually involves change in people. So think about, for example, your group of people who are used to operating IT assets on-premise. Now they're going to have to operate IT assets in the cloud. You would think it's the same, but they're actually quite different. Also, the culture. By going to a cloud environment, for instance, it spurns it has the possibility. It definitely has the possibility to spurn faster innovation in your organization. So how does that affect your current culture? Is your culture compatible with that culture of experimentation and fast innovation? And of course, it is undeniable that it does feel risky, especially for those customers who are dipping their toes for the first time in the cloud. They've never run an application or any other IT or business application on the cloud before. So there's always this deep feeling of it being risky. We might lose our data, we might lose some part of our business, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, the change is inevitable, so therefore it requires a bit of radical thinking. It requires us as leaders to adapt, to take risk, and to also learn quickly. Now, the framework or the cloud adoption framework allows for us to be able to do that. Gives us a carefully defined framework or carefully defined steps in order for us to adapt to the cloud, not just on the technological standpoint, but also for people, culture, and also for the business, specific to the realities of your business. Allows us to do experimentations and also to learn quickly from both our successes and our failures. And as we all know, change requires a culture shift within your organization, and it starts with all of us. And this is probably the reason why you are in this webinar, because we want to understand how to enact this change or become change agents within our organizations. So now let's take an overview of the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. The Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure is essentially, if I'm going to summarize it in one slide, it's this one slide right here. This is actually proven guidance to accelerate and to help customers along the cloud adoption journey. When we say the cloud adoption journey, this is an ongoing multi-month, multi-year, and perhaps a permanent part of your organization on how you would transform not just your IT infrastructure to the cloud, but how do you adapt your business to the cloud, and how do you adapt the cloud to your business the other way around. It is composed of a number of tools, resources, and guidance that allow you to go from left to right to define your business strategy or business justification and expected outcomes. This is quite important in the beginning, that your expectations on your cloud transformation is set out in the beginning so that you have a set of key performance indicators and metrics to measure your success. The second phase is planning. This means aligning actionable cloud adoption plans to your business outcomes. Easier said than done when you define your business outcomes. Say, for example, you want to increase your profitability by, for example, 15 points in the next 3 years. How do you then align the way you adopt your cloud against 15%? Now that you have that 15% as a measurable output. Third phase is to make sure that your people, your processes, and your environment are ready and continues to be ready and adaptable to the change that the cloud will provide. And then the fourth step is the actual migration or innovation of your tool sets or your business software or your applications to the cloud. This means implementing desired changes across your IT and your business processes. And then you have a continuous process of governing and managing, making sure that you have an overarching governance framework to ensure compliance, control, and security. And then mostly for the IT side, in order for you to be able to a set of resources, if you will, that would allow you to continuously operate and optimize the way you operate in the cloud. Now, everything and all of the tools and all of the guidance, Microsoft has documented all of these comprehensively and made it available for free for everyone. And you can access this in the URL on the lower left-hand side, aka.ms/CAF. That stands for Cloud Adoption Framework. So you can click on this URL, or you can just go to your browser and type in aka.ms/CAF, so you can see the entire Cloud Adoption Framework documentation in its entirety and in its full glory. Now, this is another way, and I think it's perhaps a better way to visualize the entire Cloud Adoption Framework. It is actually an iterative process. Of course, it starts with plan. In day 0 or in day 1, where you don't have anything in the cloud yet, but you've already made a decision as a business to transform your organization by using the cloud, by using Azure, and you have some rough idea on what you want to achieve, you now have to sit down with your strategic planners and sit down and actually plan to define the strategy. And then you get yourselves ready and then you define the plans to adopt. This is the reason why we have, this is the reason, let me use my pen over here. This is the reason why we have a circle around plan, ready, and adopt. Because, and notice that this is an iterative process because this is an ever-changing landscape. Nothing is ever permanent, as we said. If there are things that are, if you're, for example, adding a new business or having a strategic change in direction as far as your business is concerned, then you will have to go through this cycle in a repetitive manner. And overarching this entire plan, ready, and adopt cycle is govern and management. You have to continuously govern and manage the way we operate the cloud, the way we adapt our organization to the cloud, and how we adapt the cloud to the organization, which is the vice versa. Now, the cloud adoption framework for Azure, this is again think of it as an exploded view of the previous view. So we now know that plan, ready, and adopt to define the strategy is an iterative process, and overarching that is govern and manage process, which in itself is an iterative process. But what are the things that you do for each phase? You can see that on the right side of the slide. So defining strategy means you need to understand the motivations of your business as to why you're going to the cloud, and what are the benefits and what are the outcomes that you would like for your business. Because you cannot just simply embark in this major project without relating it to the benefits to the business, because at the end of the day, that is the most important. As far as planning is concerned, how do you rationalize your digital assets, your current applications, your hardware, your software? You'd have to do some form of inventory to see which ones are easily adaptable to the cloud, and on the other side of the coin, which ones should be, for example, left on-premise, so that you can have a hybrid environment. What is your initial organizational alignment? Of course, in day zero or day one, your original IT organization has been structured to operate things on-premise, but that definitely most likely needs to be reviewed once you start your adoption to the cloud. How do you get your people to get skills for the cloud? And what is your cloud adoption plan? When ready means that for the first time, you're getting your Azure environment set up. So we have resources such as the Azure Setup Guide. How do you set up your first landing zone? How do you expand your landing zone? And what are the best practices that some of Microsoft's best implemented cloud customers have adopted? We have even documented all of that and made sure that you get access to it so you can follow their models. Now, when you start adopting the cloud, it's basically split into two categories. You have components that you will migrate, and you will have components that you'll innovate. And for each one, we have published guides, published guides for migration and for innovation. What are some of the scenarios? What are the best practices? And what are some of the tips, or what are some of the process improvements that you can introduce? For govern, we have cloud adoption, cloud governance methodologies, benchmark standards, if you will, of some of our customers that we think have adopted Azure and govern their Azure environment the best way possible. Those are best practices, and you can set yourself against that benchmark. So, for example, we've gathered some of the best Azure customers in terms of Azure governance from the FSI sector, and you can benchmark yourself against those customers to see how you are faring as far as governance is concerned. And then you have manage. You have operations baseline and operational maturity models and tools for you to measure both. The essential thing also is to achieve balance. Again, the reason why we are embarking on a digital transformation journey using the cloud is for us to deliver modernization, to save costs for the company, to ensure that our company continues to exist in this new world where customer experience becomes important and digital experiences becomes paramount. And we have to accelerate that to make sure that we survive crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic. But the cloud adoption framework also gives us a semblance or a semblance of a balance between control and stability, but at the same time delivering speed and results. So that's why underneath it all, the cloud adoption framework allows us to align business, people, and technology strategy. It allows us to achieve not just the business goals and the technological goals, but balance that out with actionable, efficient, and comprehensive guidance that's provided by not just Microsoft, but Microsoft customers as well as benchmarks. And it also allows us to deliver fast results with control and stability. You do not want to, for example, rush into this project and just deliver outcomes on a very rapid pace without control and stability. There has to be a balance between both. Now let's talk about overcoming the common blockers. What are the adoption motivations for the cloud? Why are companies adopting to the cloud? There's more than one motivation for any organization, and these are some of the motivations that are most common across cloud adoption efforts. This would be things such as critical business events. You're exiting a data center, you've merged or acquired or divested with another company. You want to have a reduction on capital expenses. Another reason is that a majority of your line of business applications may already be end of support. Like, for example, the vendor has already informed you that they will no longer support the version of the software that you're using, and it so happens that software you're using for mission-critical purposes. There are also, for example, regulatory compliance and data sovereignty requirements. So, for example, suddenly, if you're a manufacturing company, say, let's say, for example, the regulatory authority in your country that governs the manufacturing sector suddenly defines that there has to be a newer, stricter guidelines on data privacy, and your current data infrastructure does not support that. And the only way that you can do this fast is by adopting data privacy policies that's already existing in cloud platforms such as Azure. You want to reduce your disruptions and also improve your IT stability. And if you further cut it up, why do we want to migrate our applications and infrastructure to the cloud? Again, it's very common. You got cost savings. You want to reduce your vendor or technical complexity. You want to increase your business agility. You don't want to be confined within the four walls of your data center. You want to increase capacity on demand. You want to scale to meet your greater market demands. And because your business is rapidly expanding, or you want to expand to other geographies, your little data center simply does not cannot cope. For innovations, motivations for innovations, you can see here, sometimes you want to build for new technical capabilities. Again, similar to migration, you want to scale for greater market demands or greater geographic demands, or simply you want to transform products and services. The usual way that you provide services in an offline fashion, you want to do it online. So that necessitates transforming some of the ways that you deliver your products and services over a cloud platform, for instance. And sometimes you want to be the disruptor. You want to disrupt the market with new products and services, and therefore you think that cloud platforms such as Azure can help accelerate that platform for you to disrupt the market that you're operating in. Now, it also unlocks a lot of business triggers. If you go through the cloud adoption framework, there are a lot of questions that will actually pop up. So one question is, for example, okay, we have heard about digital transformation. Where do I start? There's a tool under the define strategy phase of the cloud adoption framework called the Cloud Journey Tracker. I'll show you how to access that tool, and also how to evaluate yourself against the cloud journey. You have to start somewhere, right? So, for example, A good analogy here is that say you want to run your first marathon, which is 42 kilometers. So the first question is, can you run 42 kilometers? If you haven't run 42 kilometers before and you have zero training, of course you cannot run a marathon the next day. So you have to measure yourself against something so that you know what your baseline is. So that's what the baseline means. So try, for example, running 5 kilometers. How long did it take for you to run 5 kilometers? How did you feel after running 5 kilometers? Now that you know how long it took to run 5 kilometers and did you feel really tired after running 5 kilometers, now you know what your capabilities are at this point, and you can you can train yourself to finally run 42 kilometers within your target time. That's the purpose of the Cloud Journey Tracker, is to first create a benchmark of your capabilities right now, and then as you go along your cloud journey and your cloud transformation, you can measure yourself against the first time you ran the Cloud Journey Tracker and see how you are improving. The defined strategy also allows you to define your motivations of going to the cloud. It's an exercise. If we're really serious about this, if you follow our guidelines in the cloud adoption framework at the defined strategy phase, it facilitates a discussion on what really will motivate you to move to the cloud. It's not just technology reasons, but there's also business reasons as well. Now, another question would be, how do I organize my team to get us moving to the cloud? So, for example, I'm a CIO, I have this IT managers, I have an application development person, I have a person who runs my data center, and I have a network guy, and I have a security guy. I have all of these people in place. Now, how do I don't want to use the word reorganizations, but how do I organize this team and my organization to make sure that we get to moving to the cloud quickly? So we have a guideline on how you can initially align your organization. It's all documented there as well. If you need a clear way to guide your path to the cloud, we have a template for cloud adoption planning. It's also part of the cloud adoption framework. How do we make sure that our team gets ready to the skills to adopt the cloud? We have a skills learning plan. Again, this is guidelines within the cloud adoption framework to help you determine what type of skills you will need to operate the cloud efficiently now and in the future. The initial part of the skills learning plan is, of course, creating a benchmark, like what are your current skills right now and what are the gaps, and identify those gaps and then slowly filling up those gaps by sending your people over to training, whether it's free or paid training. Oops, sorry. Now, on the part of getting ready, I skipped that part, sorry about that. On the part of getting ready, there are also guidelines on how you build your first landing zone, how you set up your initial Azure setup. It's a step-by-step set of instructions, or there are certain scripts that you can execute to set up your first setup for Azure to make sure that every application or every new workload that you set up in Azure becomes is set up properly and completely. Now, once you've set up your initial Azure environment, now you can start migrating applications or start to innovate on Azure. Now, if you want to migrate existing workloads such as apps, data, VMs to the cloud, there are a lot of getting started guides. Like, how do you migrate VMs from on-premise to the cloud? How do you create your first application using the Azure platform as a service? How do you use the different services? All of that is in the getting started guide. There's also a tool called the Smart Assessment. We'll go through that later on to assess the readiness of the applications and your team in as far as putting these components to the cloud is concerned. If you want to build new products and services in the cloud, that's the innovate stage. Again, we have another set of getting started documentation and also online training on how to train your people to start building new stuff on Azure. If you don't know which controls, compliance, and security you need for your cloud environment, that's fine. Again, we have another assessment tools that help you benchmark your current security baseline on Azure. You have to admit to yourself that when you do your assessment the first time around, most likely you will fail. But at least you know why you failed and what are the gaps that you need to fill up. And the assessment that just does not end with telling you that you failed this and you failed that. It will actually give you some tips and next steps on how you can secure your Azure environment so that when you run the assessment again, you will pass with flying colors. And on manage, you need to understand how to operate your cloud environment. So, for example, even though if it's in the cloud environment, you still need to have operations people making sure that your cloud environment is running smoothly. So how do you get started with that? They're getting started, guys, and there are also a number of resources for you to do regular architecture reviews. And a lot of our successful cloud customers are using these tools, for example, to do a thorough and regular review of the way they're using Azure today so that they can uncover efficiencies and ways to optimize their usage of the cloud. Now, this is a view of the same cloud adoption framework, but focusing on migration. Say, for example, a majority of the things that you would like to do is just simply moving applications, infrastructure, and data from on-premise to the cloud. There is a link here, aka.ms/adopt/getting-started-migrate, that sort of creates a version of the cloud adoption framework that's specifically focused on migration. As you can see here, there are different steps. Step number 1 and 2 is to align your stakeholders and align your partner support under defined strategy. Under plan, you gather your data and analyze assets and resources, make your business case, create a migration plan, and then so on and so forth. So for those of you who went to aka.ms/CAF in the beginning, when you go through, there's a lot of documentation. It's really a lot to go through. So one way of us helping you use the cloud adoption plan that's specific for migrate projects is we've taken some of the tools and resources and made it and cherry pick some of them so that you can use it specifically for migrate situations. And this is the result. If you want to build new products and services, so entirely build new architectures, build new applications on Azure instead of migrating anything that's currently existing, you notice we have the same cloud adoption framework pattern: define strategy, plan, ready, and adopt, govern, and manage. But it is now focusing on building new products and services. You still need to document your business strategy. You still need to evaluate your business justification. You still need to gather data. But again, the point here is that the entire methodology has been collapsed and simplified for projects that focuses on building new products and services for Azure. If you want to unblock environment design and configuration, this is a flavor of the cloud adoption framework for you to get started. Sorry, I apologize for this. I should have put this slide in the beginning of the other two. But anyway, so again, same pattern: define strategy, plan, ready, adopt, govern, and manage. But this time, it is focusing more on getting your environment, your Azure environment, ready to receive the first application or to run the first workload. Now let's go through the tools, templates, and assessments, the tools that are part of the cloud adoption framework. So like I said in the beginning, the cloud adoption framework is a fully documented and a rich set of tools, templates, and assessments that is spread across the different stages of the process of the cloud adoption framework. So we're going to use this time to go through some of these tools. Here are just some of the tools. Under Define Strategy, we have the Cloud Adoption Tracker, Business Outcome Template, and under Plan, you have these different tools, and so on and so forth. So again, go to aka.ms/CAF so that you can see these different tools and see it for yourself. But I want to spend the rest of the time today just to go through some of them. Starting with Define Strategy, which is the first step. So let's imagine that you have you're not using Azure yet, and this is the first time that you're going to use Azure. The first bit that most likely you would use is an assessment tool called the Cloud Journey Tracker. So this allows you to navigate to the most relevant adoption content efficiently and detect early adoption blockers. So think of it as a self-assessment of your capabilities today, so that the rest of the cloud adoption framework will give you recommendations on what tools and what resources you should use next, depending on the outcome of your self-assessment. The Cloud Journey Tracker, as any other assessment tool, will actually start with a number of questions. So here's one of them. It will actually start with asking you one of 8 questions regarding strategy. So I don't have time to go through the tool because I'm using slides at this point, but if you do go through the tool, you will have to answer a number of questions. And you have to answer these questions as honestly as possible so that the Cloud Adoption Framework tool will give you the next set of tools, resources that's applicable to your adoption level, if you will, based on the answers to these questions. So, for example, there is one question here that will ask, what are the motivations for your cloud transformations? So check all that applies. So in my example, I checked, I want to reduce my capital expenses, I want to increase my business agility, and so on and so forth. After you answer all of those questions, it will come up with a result set that looks like this. It will show you, for example, what is your overall result. So, for example, in this case, your cloud adoption journey grade, if you will, in my case, is moderate. You have some room to improve your current environment, but you're on track. Other than the overall grade of moderate, the tool also breaks down your cloud adoption rating by several aspects, from strategy to planning to ready to governance and management. So in my example, for example, I've defined my strategy pretty well so that my grade is excellent, but I failed in govern. It's in red because it actually says that I have a few items under govern that I need to set up first to make sure that my governance process is actually set up for success in the future. Next is that if you go through the set of tools, there's also a template here called the business outcome template. So this is actually nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet, but don't think lightly about it because it is actually a good spreadsheet to fill up, if you will, because it will give you guides on things such as who are the stakeholders, identify what the business unit is, and what are the desired business outcomes, business drivers, key performance indicators, and the technical capability of Azure or cloud that you would consider at this point to deliver the outcomes that are required. Now, what are the outcomes that are typically part of this template? So it can be fiscal outcomes. So, for example, anything that has to do with the company wanting to become more profitable or generating more revenue. It can be agility outcomes, which means that you would like to become more agile or more flexible in serving your customers, and to what extent do you want that agility to become? Reach outcomes, customer and performance outcomes, and also any other business outcomes for that matter. This template becomes important because this is where you will document all the outcomes that the business wants out of the cloud project. Now, let's take a look at the tools that are available in the plan phase. I'll show you a couple of these tools. The first tool that you would see is a template called the Cloud Adoption Plan Template. So the Cloud Adoption Plan Template is actually a Word document. So the Word document looks kind of like this. So this is the first 3 pages of the Cloud Adoption Template. So if you are going to be asked by your CIO or your technical leader or your C-level executive, and you're asked the question of what is the cloud adoption plan look like for your organization, then you can actually use this template. Because here is where you can document the strategies, the business outcomes. Remember, a couple of slides back, we used the tool, an Excel spreadsheet, for you to document and talk to your different business leaders on what the desired business outcomes are. It will end up in this document. Business justification, describe your first adoption project, and a inventory of what you have currently in your digital estates, which includes your network, your application, your infrastructure, and everything that needs to be moved to the cloud eventually. So use this as a template for your cloud adoption plan. Another tool that's available as part of the plan phase is an Azure DevOps Plan Generator. So this is a tool that allows you to log and track your cloud adoption plan, specifically in the areas of DevOps. if part of your cloud project is to enable your developers to be able to create applications to the cloud, then this is a great plan template to use, so that you can show your stakeholders what that plan looks like from a DevOps perspective. Now let's now go to the ready phase. So the ready phase is where you now start seeing these tools, and these tools become more useful. Now, the first question when you get to the ready phase is, how do you set up your Azure environment? So now at this point, you already have your plan. You've defined your business outcomes. You've defined your cloud adoption plan, which also says, as part of the adoption plan, which applications go to the cloud first based on certain criteria. Now, at this point, you're now ready to set up your Azure environment. But since you're new to Azure, how do you do that? Well, first of all, I would recommend that you and your team get training on the Azure fundamentals. Microsoft regularly offers Azure fundamentals training. This is close to a full-day course. It's absolutely free, and it's all online, either recorded or live live conducts. You can also go to Microsoft Learn. But after you go through all of those training, you can still use this Azure Step Up Guide, which is a great documentation that gives you step-by-step guidance to help administrators to plan, set up, and secure your Azure for your organization. There's also another tool called the Landing Zone tools. Now, Landing Zones is, think of it as the foundation of your Azure setup, so that your workloads can be pre-provisioned. So the things such as the subscription, billing, networking, and all of the other preparatory stuff on basic Azure architecture is set up properly, so that your scaffolding, if you will, of your Azure infrastructure is solid, so that any workload or any new application that you put on top of Azure is supported by your landing zone. There are landing zone blueprints. Plans. It can be foundation blueprint. There's a migration landing zone blueprint. And if you're comfortable with using Terraform scripts, there are also Terraform landing zone blueprints. The interesting part about these blueprints is that a large portion of these blueprints are actually code that you can run directly on Azure, and just simply sit back, let the code run, and it will build the landing zone for you. Now, once you've already set up your Azure environment, by the way, the ready part also includes other tools, such as a suggestion of how you track your names and your resources. So there's a naming and tagging tracking template. And there's also a readiness checklist. Now, let's now go to the adopt phase. Now, so at this point, you're now ready to start migrating applications and your infrastructure or your data to the cloud. So these are the tools that are available here. Starting with another assessment tool called the SMART assessment tool, which is an acronym that stands for Strategic Migration Assessment and Readiness Tool. Now, like any other assessment tool, it will actually start with a number of questions that you, again, have to answer thoroughly and correctly and as honestly as possible. And the output of the assessment would look something like this. It will give you a result that gives you, for example, in my case, gives me a moderate grade. It says that I have some room to improve on the current environment, and also on the right side, it gives me what are the different categories in my environment that I need to watch out for or improve on. So, like, for example, in my case, after answering the questions, it seems that the SMART tool is telling me that I should pick the right partner for my Azure project, and also I need to make sure that my landing zone is set up properly. Once I've done both of those and make other adjustments, I can go back to the SMART assessment readiness tool, answer the same questions, and see if all of these bars become green. Once they become green, then you can safely conclude that you can now start migration. And these are the other data as well. Now, if you go to page down in this particular page, it doesn't just give you a grade, but it actually gives you recommended actions. And since if you notice the fonts in the recommended action page are actually in blue, that's because these are hyperlinks. So, for example, if one of the recommended actions over here is for your business case is to learn how to approach building a business case, click on this link and there will be more documentation and sometimes a video to help you, in this case, determine how to create a business case for your organization. Another resource is the Azure Migration Guide. So you can go straight to the Azure Migration Guide using this URL. And this is a set of comprehensive documentation, which is a step-by-step guidance to help you assess your current environment, prepare for migration, and make the shift to Azure. There's also another guide called the Azure Innovation Guide. Now, this is, again, a set of documentation that helps guide you on how to build solutions on top of Azure. So whereas the previous guide is telling you how to migrate current components of your IT infrastructure to Azure, this one gives you guides on how to build new components or new applications, for example, on top of Azure. Now that you have started adopting and started putting up applications on Azure and you're starting to build new stuff on Azure, now it's time to kickstart your govern phase. Now, if you notice, there's a number of tools certainly more tools and resources compared to the other phases of the cloud adoption framework under govern. This is because this is where we want our customers to succeed. As a customer, you would be devoting a lot of time and devoting a lot of resources putting up applications on Azure, and as more and more of your infrastructure goes up in Azure, you become more dependent on it. So therefore, we would like to give you all of these tools under the govern phase to ensure that you govern you govern and manage your Azure environment as best as possible. So let's take a look at some of these tools. One of these tools is the Governance Benchmark. This is again another assessment tool that helps you understand your current state and prepare you for your cloud journey. Because this is an assessment tool, you again have to answer a number of questions through a question wizard. And depending on the way you answer your questions, it will give you a readiness profile in terms of the way of whether you are prepared to govern your Azure environment. So in this case, I think I selected FSI or financial institution in this case. If you notice that there are a number of bar charts over here, so it's basically telling me that my business priorities and my current state is at par, but I am actually quite far from I'm actually exceeding the industry benchmarks, which is the gray font right here. Now, again, this is just an example. Depends on how you answer the questions in the questionnaire. You can actually compare your organization against other companies within your peer companies, if you will, in the same industry that has adopted an Azure, and measure yourself against your level of governance compared to these other industries or these other companies in the same industry. Now, I apologize if that was quick. We're almost at time, so just go through the govern set of tools when you have time. Now let's talk about manage tools. Now manage means this is now the part where you can imagine you're now at the point of continuing to put more and more applications, your line of business applications, creating more applications and creating new stuff, and using more and more capabilities of Azure. So you continue to go back to your original business justification plan as you defined in define strategy and plan. Now, as you are moving up those applications on Azure, now you have to start thinking about how do you make sure that your Azure environment is well managed. Now, we have a number of tools that can help you do that. So one of them is an assessment tool called the Azure Architecture Review. It examines your workloads through several lenses. These lenses include resiliency, cost, DevOps practices, security, and scalability. Again, because this is an assessment tool, you have to go through a number of questions, and also you can use automated tools within these tool sets to look at your current Azure environment, and the combination of your answers to your questions and the results of the assessment tool will yield a report that kind of looks like this. It gives you, for example, a review. And now in this case, I'm not doing too hot. It says here, for example, that I need to do certain things in my Azure environment so that I can improve the way I manage my cost in using Azure in terms of cost optimization. I need to do a lot more improvements in terms of making sure that my security, as you can see, the slider is in the red zone, but my security in Azure is improved. Now, the whole purpose of this assessment, again, is to make a check of your Azure environment to make sure that it is not consuming a lot of cost. You're operating it in a well-operated manner, and it's also running efficiently. You are using all of the reliability and resiliency tools to make sure that your environment is resilient against failure, and also you're using all of the security capabilities that has been made available to you. Now, once again, it doesn't just give you a grade, but it can also give you recommended actions. Like in this case, it has given me 46 recommended actions for security, and I can click one of them to, I can click one or some or even all of them to look at the steps and do these steps to ensure that my security is solid. Now, as we've gone through a majority of the tools, resources, and assessment tools that are available in the Cloud Adoption Framework, but we would recommend as Microsoft to partner with a Microsoft partner that has done this several times before. We have a set of partners called Expert Microsoft Service Partners, or Expert MSPs. So once you've heard, if your partner is an Expert MSP, I can almost guarantee that you are going to be in good hands, because this partner has gone through the Cloud Adoption Framework training. They've applied the Cloud Adoption Framework as well as the tools and the assessment under the framework to help customers with their cloud success. So these are all the URLs that I'd like everyone to remember at this point. There is a URL for you to find the right partner in our geography. If you don't want to find your own partner, you can just simply send me an email, then I can refer you to the partner that is appropriate for your industry and for your needs. You can take the different assessments, you can read the documentations, and these are the other tools. These are the other tools and links that you can visit definitely. All of the tools, the documentation, and the assessments that I've just spoken about are all in aka.ms/CAF. Use this as a jump-off point for you to understand the Cloud Adoption Framework better. It's pretty easy to use. Just click on the Get Started, Start Your Cloud Journey to start using, to start getting familiar with all the steps of the Cloud Adoption Framework, as well as use the tools and the different resources. All right, so that's all the time that we have. But before we end this webinar, I'd like to give you a few reminders. You can still get your Azure free account by going to azure.com/free. Now, once you have entered your personal details, you can get $200 of credit that you can spend. This is free credit, by the way. Your credit card will not be charged. There's also available 12 months of popular free services, and there are 25 services that are always free. These are the services that are available, that are going to be given to you for each month for an entire year. So you have access to 750 hours of Linux virtual machine compute, as well as 750 hours of Windows virtual machines, and so on and so forth. This is just a quick visualization of all of the other services that are available as part of the Azure free credits that you can use within the 12 months as your trial is still ongoing. Now, once you have exceeded the limits of all of the other services, that's the only time where your $200 credit becomes used. And once your $200 credit becomes close to zero, you will get a friendly email from Microsoft to remind you that your credit is low. So it will ask you whether you want to continue to use the service, and this time charging your credit card, or you want to be connected to a local Microsoft partner who can then bill you so that you can continue using your Azure, and as well as use the services of that partner to help you along your cloud journey, your Azure adoption. If you want to learn at your own pace, there is always Microsoft Learn. It's a long URL, but remember this URL, aka.ms/learn. All of the learning courses that you would need to learn Azure, all the way from Azure fundamentals to Azure architecture, which are some of the advanced courses. Power BI courses are also here. Microsoft 365, Office 365, as well as Dynamics courses, and even Power BI and Power Apps. Everything that you need to learn to be able to use all of these tools and become experts, as well as preparing for certification exams, can be found on Microsoft Learn. And like I said, and let me emphasize this, these are all for free. All you need to have is a PC with an internet connection, a good set of earphones or headphones, and time. So make good use of the time that we have in order for us to upskill ourselves for what's needed in this new world. And you can actually select the different training courses based on the roles that you have. So if you are, for example, aspiring to become a data scientist, click on the select the data scientist in the drop-down, and the Microsoft Learn will actually select the courses that is appropriate for the role that you want, all the way from basic all the way to the advanced courses. There's also a specific learning site just for you to become an AI expert. It's called aischool.microsoft.com. This is, for example, where you can go to learn the basics of AI, AI in the business context, how AI is used in government context, and also in different industries such as manufacturing, retail, financial services, and education. Not only that, but it also gives you technical training, free technical training on how to build, for example, AI applications that uses our chatbot capabilities, our cognitive services capabilities, and all of the cloud-based and cloud-powered AI capabilities, and even Azure machine learning you can learn from this site. And again, this is absolutely free. Complete documentation is on Microsoft Docs. So the Cloud Adoption Framework, for instance, is on the Microsoft Docs site. So just go to docs.microsoft.com, select Azure from the selection, and all of the documentation that you need is already there. This is going to be your new best friend if you start on your Azure journey, especially in the beginning. Combine this with Microsoft Learn. These are two very powerful resources to help you get your technical skills to get your cloud journey going. Okay, well, that hour just flew by rather quickly. Again, what we just covered is just an overview of the Cloud Adoption Framework and the different tools and the resources that you have access to ensure that you can accelerate and become successful in your cloud adoption journey. Now, if you're ready to put the framework into action and learn more details about each steps in the framework, you can actually scan the QR code that you see there in front of you right now to join the Azure Landing Zones webinars. There will be series of webinars that we are producing. Just scan the QR code below to register. And if you need to help to accelerate your cloud adoption journey, definitely speak to us today so we can talk to you directly, or any of our migration partners can also talk to you. Just click on the Contact Us on the widget below. All right, now that's the time that we have for today. Thank you very much for spending what is close to an hour with us to understand the topic of today's webinar. If you like these if you like these formats of learning, like on-demand webinars or live webinars, please do register in our future webinars. And then if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a note at hhermida@microsoft.com. So once again, thank you very much for spending your hour with us, and I hope you've learned something new today. Thank you.